You've heard the stories, haven't you? The ones about the Simpsons, that old family name that still lingers in the shadows of a small town in Ohio. It's not the TV show, you know, but a real place, a real family, and a real mystery that never quite faded. The Simpsons were once a respected family, known for their kindness and quiet strength. But something changed. A tragedy, a disappearance, and then silence. The house that once echoed with laughter now sits in eerie stillness, untouched by time. People say you can still hear them laughter, voices, maybe even a child's laughter echoing through the halls. But no one dares to go inside. The town has long since moved on, but the house remains, a silent witness to a story that never ends. And so the legend grows. A family that once brought light to a dark place, now a place of mystery, where the past refuses to be forgotten. You've heard the stories. Now, are you ready to step closer? You ever wonder how a name like The Simpsons came to be? It started with a family, a name, and a bit of old-timey humor. The Simpsons weren't just any family. They were a real bunch of folks who lived in a small town in the early 1900s, and their story is as strange as it is fascinating. The family was led by a man named Abraham Simpson, a carpenter with a knack for telling jokes and a love for his family. His wife, Amelia, was the heart of the house, and their kids, including the famous Bart, Lisa, and Maggie, grew up in a world that felt both cozy and peculiar. The family's story became part of local folklore, passed down through generations. Some say the Simpsons' home was cursed, others that they simply lived a life so full of character that their names stuck in history like a well-told tale. And so, the Simpsons, real people, real history, and a name that would one day become something much bigger. But let's not forget, they were just a family, living their lives in a quiet, small town, far from the world of TV and fame. You remember the first time you noticed something was off. It was a quiet Sunday, the kind where the sun was just right, but the house felt like it was holding its breath. The radio crackled with static, and for a moment, it sounded like a voice, just a whisper, like someone was trying to say your name. The next day, you found a letter in your mother's desk, sealed with her signature, but addressed to you. It was written in her hand, yet it spoke of things she never told you. You tried to read it, but the words blurred. It was as if the paper was alive, and the ink was shifting, whispering secrets you weren't ready to hear. And then, the silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of something watching. You turned around, and the room was empty, but you could feel it like the walls were holding its breath. You ever wonder what happens when a whole town disappears? Well, in the Simpson family, it wasn't just the people who vanished, it was the very idea of normalcy. The night they vanished, the sky was a bruised purple, and a wind carried the sound of something heavy falling. The last anyone saw of the Simpsons was a single flashlight beam slicing through the woods, illuminating a trail of footprints that led nowhere. They were just trying to find their missing son, who had wandered off during a storm. What they found was a silence so thick, it pressed against your ears. No wind, no birds, just the sound of their own breathing. And then, a whisper not from the trees, but from the air itself. The search parties came and went, but nothing was ever found. They said the family had been taken by something older than the land itself. Something that fed on the silence and the stories people told to fill the void. Now, every time the wind picks up in that part of the woods, people say they hear a child's laugh, echoing through the trees. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the silence breaking. You ever think about what it feels like to be lost, not just in the woods, but in your own mind? That's the real disappearance, the one that leaves you standing in the dark, waiting for something to happen. I remember the first time I heard the story of the Simpson family. It was a cold February night, and a woman in her late 70s told me about her childhood in a small town in Ohio. She said the Simpson house had a way of whispering to the children, like it was trying to tell them something they weren't ready to hear. She described the house as old, with a crooked porch and a fence that leaned like it was holding its breath. The children would hear the voice in the woods, calling them by name, and they would run back home, breathless, eyes wide, as if they'd been somewhere they weren't supposed to be. Then, one morning, the voice was gone, but the silence was louder than the sound. The town moved on, and the house fell into disrepair, its windows boarded up, its doors sealed with rusted locks. But the stories didn't end there. Years later, a new family moved in. They said the house was quiet, peaceful, but the voice came back, not to the children, but to the parents. It whispered in the night, in the silence between heartbeats, and it never stopped until the last one left. The town never spoke of it again, but the house still stands, and the voice still calls. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it in the wind, in the silence, in the way the shadows move when no one is watching. We followed the trail of whispers, tracing the Simpson family's path through the 1970s like we were piecing together a puzzle that had been buried for decades. It was like walking through a memory that still smelled like old wood and burned toast. Every clue seemed to point to a quiet tragedy, no blood, no bodies, just a family that vanished like smoke in the morning. It was hard not to wonder what kind of love could hold someone to a place so firmly that they left no trace behind. Then there were the strange things, reports of a child's laughter echoing through empty halls, a clock that never stopped ticking, and a voice calling out from the darkness. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone to listen. We found a journal, written in a shaky hand, filled with entries about a family that never left. It was like reading a diary from a dream, one that felt too real, too personal, too close to home. In the end, the investigation led us to more questions than answers. But as we left the house, the wind picked up, and the silence felt heavier, like the house was still waiting for someone to come back and finish this story. You ever wonder what happens when a secret is buried too deep, even for the earth? The Simpson family's history is a tangled web of love, lies, and loss, but one detail has never been explained: the missing letter from the original will. They say the letter was never found, not even in the family vault. Some believe it was lost in a fire, others think it was taken by an heir who vanished. But no one knows for sure, and that's the real mystery. Some say the letter held a final wish, a secret promise, or a terrible curse. But the truth, it's still buried, in the silence, in the silence, in the silence. And so, the Simpson story remains, a tale of love and loss, of legacy and mystery, and one final question that has never been answered: what was in that missing letter? You've heard the names, but let me tell you what the locals really whisper. They say the Simpson house was never just a home, it was a place where secrets were buried deeper than the soil. Some say the family was cursed by a vengeful spirit from the woods, a woman who died in a storm and was never found. Others claim the last Simpson left in a hurry, leaving behind only a locked room and a trail of unanswered questions. Now, you might think this is just old wives' tales, but there's a truth buried in the stories. The last known Simpson, a man named Elijah, vanished without a trace in 1927, and no one has seen or heard from him since. What happened to him? Did he die in the woods? Did he flee? Or did he stay, trapped by the very place he called home? The answer, like the house itself, remains locked away. You know, sometimes the most haunting things aren't the ghosts, but the silence that follows. The Simpson family, now long gone, left behind a home that still hums with their presence. You ever wonder what it's like to live in a house that remembers you? The house itself is like a living memory. Every creak, every draft seems to whisper a story. You can almost hear the walls breathing, like they're holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. There's something about this place that feels like it's caught between time and memory. You can't help but feel that, even now, the past is still trying to speak, and we're just listening. And so, the mystery lingers, not because it's solved, but because it's still waiting. Like the Simpsons themselves, it's a story that refuses to end. You ever wonder if some secrets are meant to stay just that unresolved? You've heard the stories, you've felt the chill, but sometimes the quietest places hold the deepest secrets. What if the real mystery isn't in the past, but in the present? Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Kindle Paperwhite e-reader. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The Simpsons may have a history, but history is full of ghosts, and some of them still whisper, waiting to be heard. The next story isn't just about the past, it's about what we carry with us. And sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried. So, as we wrap up, I'll leave you with this: the past is never really gone. It just waits like a ghost in the attic, ready to step into the light. Now, prepare yourself. The next story is about a place where the echoes of history still ring true, and it's about to begin. You've heard of the old abbey, haven't you? The one that stood on the edge of town, where the fog clings like a secret and the wind carries whispers of the past. Mary's was never just a church, it was a place where miracles and madness walked hand in hand. For centuries, it was a place of prayer and peace, but the deeper you dug into its history, the more it seemed to shift. Some say the monks who lived there were haunted by their own sins. Others say the silence was too thick, like the air before a storm. But it wasn't just the monks who left their mark. The abbey was built on ancient ground, and the earth remembers. Some say the crypt beneath it is where the real magic and the real horror began. There are stories, some real, some whispered in the dark, about footsteps in the empty halls, about voices that echo when no one's there, and about the way the cold seems to follow you, like a ghost that won't let go. So, what do you think? Was it the monks, the land, or something else that made St. Mary's a place where the veil between worlds was always thin? Or maybe it was never about the past at all. You've heard the whispers of the abbey, but do you know where it all began? A humble stone monastery, built in the early 12th century, where monks prayed and learned, and where the first seeds of darkness were sown. The monks of St. Mary's were devout, but they were not without their secrets. Some say they practiced forbidden rituals to appease a vengeful spirit. Others claim they hid a cursed relic beneath the altar. The abbey thrived for centuries, but rumors of strange deaths and unexplained disappearances began to circulate. Some said the monks were cursed for their sins. Others believed they had awakened something that should have stayed buried. By the time the Reformation came, the abbey was in ruins. The monks fled. The church was dismantled, and the crypt was sealed away, its secrets locked behind stone and silence. You remember the way the air felt that morning, thick and heavy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. The sun was trying to peek through the clouds, but the light just looked wrong. The monks had been gone for nearly a year, but the silence wasn't the kind that feels peaceful. It was the silence that feels like it's waiting for something to happen. Then came the whispers, so faint, so soft, like the wind through old stone. Some said they heard them in the cloisters, others in the chapel, but none could say for sure what they were saying. The caretaker, a gruff old man named Thomas, swore he saw a figure in the east window just before dawn. It was too tall, too still, and it didn't move when he looked directly at it. He said he didn't want to stay the night, but the townsfolk laughed. "You're the last one here," they said. "What's there to be afraid of?" And so, the night came, and the whispers grew louder. You've heard the whispers of the abbey's past, but nothing prepared you for the night the bell went silent. The monks had vanished, one by one, and the last bell rang just before the first body was found. They say the bell was struck by an unseen hand, its sound echoing through the abbey like a warning. The monks, all devout and disciplined, were found in their cells, their bodies cold, their eyes open as if they'd seen something beyond the veil. The crypt, sealed for centuries, was opened that night. What they found inside was not the remains of a dead man, but a face pale, staring, and impossibly familiar, as if it had been waiting for them all along. The abbey was abandoned soon after, its bells never ringing again, but every year on the night of the 14th, the bell still echoes through the stone, a sound that seems to come from somewhere just beyond the reach of the living. And if you ever find yourself walking those ancient halls, remember this: the bell doesn't ring for the dead. It rings for those who listen. I've spoken to dozens of locals, but one woman, Alina, still haunts my mind. She claims she saw a figure in the crypt, dressed in 14th century robes, kneeling before the altar. Alina swore the figure looked exactly like the abbey's last abbot, who vanished in 1348. She said it raised its head, meeting her gaze, and then vanished into the shadows. Some say the abbey's last abbot was cursed for hiding a secret. Others say he was murdered by his own monks. But no one knows what he did to deserve the crypt's wrath. What if the crypt is still waiting for someone to uncover the truth? And what if the abbot's spirit is still here, watching, waiting for the next trespasser? You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered if they're just warnings, or if there's something more? We began by retracing the monks' steps, following the faint trail of their footsteps through the damp stone corridors. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and something older, like the memory of a long-forgotten prayer. The first clue was a small, hand-carved cross found near the entrance. It was weathered, but the markings were clear, for the lost. It felt like a whisper from the past, a silent plea. Then there was the sound like a soft chime, but not from any bell. It echoed through the vaults, just before the wind would naturally howl through the arches. It was as if the place was breathing. One of the monks, a quiet man named Brother Elias, claimed he saw a flicker of movement in the farthest chamber. He said it looked like a child, but when we went to check, there was nothing but dust and silence. The most unsettling thing was the absence of decay, no rot, no mold, no signs of the centuries passing. It felt like the place was holding its breath, waiting for something. You see it now, don't you? That single, unmistakable detail that haunts every account, every whisper from the abbey's last living witness. A mark, a symbol, a shadow that shouldn't be there. No one can say for sure what it looks like. Some say it's a cross, others a serpent, and a few insist it's nothing at all. But the fact that it's always there has never been explained. You've heard the stories, but what if the real horror isn't the ghost or the grave, it's the silence that follows that one detail? The one thing no one can explain. And that, dear listener, is why the crypt of St. Mary's Abbey still lingers in the minds of those who dare to walk its halls. Because the truth, like the symbol, has never been explained. Some say the whispers in the crypt aren't just echoes of the past, they're the voices of the living, trapped by the weight of their own secrets. Others believe the abbey was built on a site of ancient pagan worship, and the spirits are not just Christian souls, but something older, something hungry. But don't be fooled by the stories. Some of the most chilling accounts come from people who claim they heard a voice calling their name, not from the crypt, but from the outside. And then there's the theory that the abbey was never truly abandoned, it's just that the last of the monks left in secret, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right time to return. So, when you think about the crypt, don't just think of ghosts. Think of the people who believed in it, who lived it, who may still be waiting for someone to listen. You know, some mysteries don't just fade away, they cling to the walls like the scent of old incense, refusing to be forgotten. The last official record of the abbey's last monk was a single line in a 17th century ledger. Brother Elias vanished without a trace on the feast of Saint Sebastian. The local historian says Elias was the only monk who ever dared to question the abbey's hidden vaults. He vanished the day they sealed the doors with iron and lead. To this day, no one knows if he was taken or if he simply walked into the dark and never looked back. But the crypt still remembers. And if you ever find that door, you might just hear the echo of a man whispering, "I'm still here waiting for someone to listen." Before you go, if you enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell us in the comments what you'd like us to make next. We read every single one. Thank you so much for watching. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end.